Hello again, classmates. This week we explored the Oxford Scholarship online database looking for research that would be useful for our research plans. Liberty's biblical worldview principles denote that the historian must be dedicated to a reasoned and investigated reconstruction of primary sources. By evaluating the methods and explorations of others, we can set ourselves up for success. When I first started working with this database, I struggled finding relevant sources, but eventually by searching for left and women, I was able to narrow the selection of the books on 20th century American history to a relevant body of research. However, throughout this course, I've identified numerous topics and figures that were central to America's communist history that have been left out of the literature. As I continued, I identified three main reasons for those gaps. First, the main source of records, which has only recently become available, is the CPUSA archive. Unfortunately, the work and documentation related to those that didn't align themselves with the party line were excluded as a result of communist infighting. Secondly, many academics, professionals, government employees, writers, etc. redacted their own work to avoid or fend off suspicion during the height of McCarthyism and throughout America's cycles of Red Scares. Lastly, renunciation of involvement with the Communist Party makes it nearly impossible to document the impact of some of the key influencers in the American left. The three sources I identify here begin to break through those barriers, and I can emulate their approaches in a lot of ways. Common Sense and a Little Fire covers working class women, suffrage, unions, and other labor-related women's issues. Annalise Orleck explores the different phases of involvement of women in working class politics. For my research, parts 2 and 3 about industrial feminism are most interesting, particularly the work related to the International Ladies Garment Workers Union. Orleck writes, "From the moment that garment workers began reading to each other on the garment shop floor to make up for their inability to attend school, the drive for education was a central thrust of industrial feminists in the labor movement. I had come across this union in its relation to the industrial education program sponsored by and facilitated through the CPUSA, and Fania Cohn, who's highlighted in Chapter 5, played an important role." Kathleen MacDonald's Feminism, the Left, and Post-War Literary Culture takes a slightly different approach. She follows the evolution of a feminist leftist consciousness as women became increasingly involved throughout the 20th century. The CPUSA grew throughout the 1930s and 40s due to its anti-fascism campaigns, and she highlights this movement and a particular woman involved in those efforts in Chapter 2 on Fighting Fascism, Martha Dodd. MacDonald writes, "Dodd was involved in the anti-fascist resistance movement connected to the Communist Party in the United States, and many of Dodd's writings reflect the changes in the party's approach to the woman question. The communist response to the woman question is of great interest to me, as many women joined and parted ways with the CPUSA because of this singular issue. Among them was a famous communist writer, Mary Inman." Another particularly left-leaning woman, Crystal Eastman, was central to Amy Aronson's Crystal Eastman, A Revolutionary Life. Eastman was a lawyer, anti-militarist, feminist, and journalist. She co-founded the ACLU, and her brother wrote for The Liberator, a famous socialist magazine. Aronson writes that Eastman never considered joining the Socialist Party or later the Communist Party, even though she first identified herself as a socialist and publicly blessed the Russian Revolution in 1917. This is a great example of where CPUSA and communist involvement is not solely indicated by official party membership, and at the same time, socialist and communist causes were inextricably tied to the feminist movements of the 20th century in America. Hopefully, by looking at these more biographical and literary approaches, I can refine the thoughts I have on an approach according to the work that has succeeded for others.